Howdy, and welcome to Mo's World, the baseball podcast. We're excited to bring you the latest episode. Your feedback is important to us, so please feel free to share your comments. If you enjoy the show, spread the word to your friends and subscribe. So, in the second episode of Season 2, we want to take a moment to reflect on our first season. We thoroughly enjoyed presenting each episode, and I hope that you're returning for Season 2 and continue to support us. This year, we aim to expand and grow our little podcast, so please share it with your friends. Season 1 of the podcast became a labor of love. We worked hard to define our identity, and it wasn't always easy. We faced some initial technical difficulties and microphone clarity problems, and we also made a few rookie mistakes along the way. And so we began. Episode 1, Ted Williams, the OPS issue. Our first episode on Ted Williams was the most listened to podcast of the season, and we really made a big splash. So thank you. I received a lot of feedback from Red Sox fans who were quite surprised that I chose to start with Ted Williams instead of a Yankee. Well, I may be primarily a Yankees and Braves fan. It was impossible to ignore Ted Williams and all the discussions about OPS and on-base percentage. Now, just a quick update on the OPS leaders of 2024. We had Aaron Judge with 1.159, followed by Shohei Ohtani at 1.036, Juan Soto at 988, and Bobby Witt Jr. at 977. Now, do you remember what Ted Williams averaged over his career? I'm not telling you. Episode 2 was the impossible record. Now, I took quite a bit of heat for this episode. Many laughed at it and said it was a typical old-time stat. Who cares about complete games? Get over it. Well, you got me there. After another year of starting pitchers barely making it past 5 innings while earning over $35 million, I guess I am a bit old school in this regard. If you're curious about the decline and potential end of the complete game as a metric, be sure to check out our second episode. Episode 3 was on framing and expansion. Now, in this episode, we discussed the importance of a catcher's pitch framing and the dilemma of adopting a one-knee stance. Now, I'm opposed to both of them. I stand by the insights shared in this podcast, especially after observing yet another season where catchers struggled to block pitches in the dirt. I highly recommend giving this episode another listen. And with the current situation surrounding the team formerly known as the Oakland A's and also the Tampa Bay Rays, there's been a lot of talk about potential expansion and relocation. I believe we haven't fully addressed this topic, and it'll be worth keeping an eye on the upcoming season. In episode 4, we saw the results of the 2023 rule changes. Now, honestly, this was not one of our most popular episodes, but I enjoyed examining how the game has evolved, for the better. Now, the pitch clock is here to stay, making an average of a half an hour difference in most games. If you're still unsure about all the changes, take a moment and refresh your memory with this episode. Episode 5, we had Major League Baseball versus Minor League Baseball. And keep in mind, there's one thing, December 1st, 2027. That marks the end of the first collective bargaining agreement between Minor League Baseball and Major League Baseball. Additionally, MLB collective bargaining agreement will conclude on December 1st, 2026. So the timing could lead to some potential conflicts between players, teams, and alignments. If you didn't get a chance to visit a minor league game last year, I highly encourage you to do so this year. It's a fantastic experience, and you get to play scout for the future major leaguers. Now, it offers affordable entertainment for the whole family. Personally, I'm looking forward to making a road trip this year to see the Braves' new Double-A team, formerly in Mississippi, and they'll be playing in Columbus, Georgia, and will be called the Columbus Clingstones. I also touched on the great names in minor league baseball, and I must say that this one in particular is a fun one. Now, I hear you asking already, what the heck's a clingstone? Well, it actually makes perfect sense. Georgia is known as the Peach State, and clingstones and freestones are the two primary types of peaches. So the Columbus Clingstones are paying homage to Georgia's status as the Peach State. See? It all ties together. Now, in episode 6, we had Major League Baseball and RSNs. Wow, this episode seemed to wake up a lot of people, and it should have, because it's still going on right now. We all know about the money in TV deals, but damn, did you realize that the two teams that played in the World Series both made over $200 million on their local TV deals, and no other team came close? So, just saying, it was a good listen, and if you want to reiterate the importance of RSNs and their downfall, listen to this episode. Episode 7, we did an all-star game first half. And speaking of popularity, I get it. You guys made your point with this episode. You hated it. And I didn't care for it either. So we will not be doing any episodes this season that focus too much on current stats and other information that's already covered on MLB Network. You know, MLB Network is too good. I don't want to compete with it. What more can I add to it? No. You spoke, I listened. We won't be doing the same kind of episodes. Episode 8 was on prospects, or as I like to say now, prospect or suspect. Now, my Yankee fans were split on this episode 50-50. So let's see what happens with Ben Rice, who went from being a hot prospect to a major suspect in the same season. He went from hitting 3 home runs as the only Yankee rookie in the history of the Yankees to July, who was someone who has lost all confidence and was striking out at alarming rates. Now, what happened? I don't know. Is he the next Oswaldo Cabrera? Is Cabrera the next Estevan Florial? This podcast was popular with many listeners who try to struggle with prospects, suspects, what do you do with them? Episode 9, that was our trading deadline result. Now, I thought that this would be an interesting topic, but I guess I put you guys to sleep with that. So once again, duly noted. Now, episode 10. Now, that was one of my favorite ones because I'm a Mike Trout fan. And this episode made a lot of listeners wonder, is he? Will he? Can he? Would they? If you're curious about what I'm talking about, listen to this episode, and let's all hope I'm wrong. By the way, did you remember my trade proposal? I had the Los Angeles Angels trading Mike Trout to the Philadelphia Phillies for 20-year-old number 5 prospect Brian Rincon, shortstop, and 19-year-old number 16 prospect Alexis De La Cruz, a starting pitcher, along with a decent $10 million per year for a remaining contract, which runs through 2030. And the Phillies would announce Mike Trout as their new DH in 2025. What if, right? So, this was one of our top podcasts of the year, and it was an enjoyable one doing. Episode 11 was my version of This Week in Baseball. It was the show I grew up on, watching Mel Allen as the host. It was the only way to get updates and information on teams that were outside of your area. This episode served as a tribute to that show. It was long, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. Episode 12 was our new baseball stats and the best current batting duos in the league. You know, it was funny when someone asked me about all the new analytical stats that are becoming common. When teams started posting these stats on the stadium scoreboard, you knew it was time to say, what the hell am I looking at? But honestly, I tried to explain them, but it was a bit overwhelming for all those stats. We transitioned into discussing about top hitting duos, primarily focus on the impressive seasons that both Aaron Judge and Juan Soto were having. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Episode 13 was a fun one. It was just the best bar facts. And all my bar listeners had a great time with this one. It was just a fun, lighthearted take on baseball, and it received some decent reviews. Now, episode 14, that was our Noah Syndergaard and collective bargaining thoughts. Now, this popular episode was filled with a lot of what-if scenarios, and I'm really curious about where Noah Syndergaard's future still lies at this moment, and whether he will possibly take into some of our suggestions. Now, I've got strong feelings about the luxury tax, and especially unless you're following my proposed changes, I mean, just listen to it. It was a great listen. Excuse me. Episode 16 was about the Cy Young contenders. You didn't care for that. I missed one. Episode 15, the candidates for MVP. You didn't care for that one either. Episode 17, the playoffs part 1, got a little too, like I said, we were out of our defined field, and Major League Baseball Network does a much better job at that. Episode 20 was the free agent episode. That one was, is kind of popular among listeners. Looking for potential landing spots for players. One takeaway was that the initial estimated figures for player contracts were way off this offseason. Teams was spending money like never before. And it makes me wonder if the gap between the have and the have-not teams has widened this year. Obviously, the significant example is Juan Soto. His initial estimates at the start of 2024 suggested he could possibly get a 12-year, $535 million contract, when in reality he signed for 15 years at $765 million. Wow. Just wow. Now, episode 21, we saw our GMs and managers on the hot seat. And this episode, we discussed a lot about GMs and managers. And it's going to be interesting to see if any of these changes occur before the start of 2025 as well. Now, episode 22 was definitely my favorite one of the year. It's still too early to provide any definitive numbers for this episode, but it was a hot topic for me. Personally, I'm disturbed by the association between Major League Baseball and gambling. It feels like a sellout. As for Hall of Fame voting, check out my voting criteria and let me know if you agree. This was my favorite podcast of the season, and since voting was just completed for the 2025 Hall of Fame class, perhaps you should revisit this episode and look at Mo's voting criteria. And are you curious, what were our most listened to podcasts on season 1? Well, our debut episode, number 1 with Ted Williams, the OPS rockstar, was the most popular episode of the season. Number 2 was episode 10. It was Mike Trout. Is he finished? Episode 2, The Impossible Record, was our third most popular podcast. And coming in 4th place was the episode for the RSNs. And pulling up the rear for the most popular podcast of the year was episode 8, Prospects or Suspects. So I'm glad you enjoyed these episodes, and I hope you'll stick around for season 2 of the podcast. I definitely have my favorite moments, and I know you do too. I'll do my best to keep you entertained and informed for the upcoming season. I know it's tough in the off season to keep your attention to baseball, and I truly appreciate you listening to me rant about baseball, especially during the winter months. Hey, but spring is on the way. February 13th starts spring in my book because that's when pitchers and catchers report. So that's a wrap on today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed our little recap. Don't forget, though, our off-season schedule for releasing new episodes are still 2 times per month until spring training. So the first Friday of the month and the last Friday of the month, each about 20 minutes long. So thank you for listening, and please spread the word to your friends. In the next episode on February 7th, we will be discussing steroids 30 years later. That's right. In the meantime, ask yourself, whose world is it? It's Moe's world.